Welcome to Freaked Out with your co-hosts, Liz and Landon.
What's up, everybody?
What's up, everybody? I am so incredibly happy to be here today and share in not only Pride Month, but the stories that people really need to hear out there. I understand there are people that really don't understand why Pride is so important and why people continuously keep celebrating Pride and pushing forward. Perhaps maybe some countries with the LGBTQ community is more accepting than other countries, but right now in the USA, drag queens and trans people and other members of the LGBTQ community are not able to live their lives and are having their rights taken away. Pretty damn scary. It's actually so scary that, we want to open everyone's eyes and share these stories, and we want to go way back to the beginning. And what better way than to start off with Marsha P.
Everybody knows who Marsha P is, and if you don't, today we're going to bring her story to you guys. This is a pretty graphic case, and we will not be holding back in this episode, and we will be completely blunt because we really want you all to know the ins and outs of what the trans community and the LGBTQ plus community is dealing with.
Absolutely. Viewers' discretion for all episodes this month is advised. I know that there are a lot of people that don't necessarily agree with people who are gay or trans because they really don't understand or know that it's okay. But even if you don't agree with trans rights, I hope you agree with human rights and understand that just because it's not part of your life doesn't mean it should be ignored. So even if you are someone who does not support the LGBTQ community, it's a good idea to at least understand that hate against anyone is completely wrong and obviously morally wrong. Do you honestly think that God is sitting up there and is okay with the idea of people being killed because of their gender identity? Does it really matter that much? And who the hell are you to kill people because of their gender identity?
This is a topic that Liz and I are both very passionate about for many reasons, not only our personal experiences, but also others. And this is one of the reasons we have this podcast to begin with. We want to be able to show every person and every person's experiences in all walks of life and what they went through. And perhaps we can have a few changes of heart of people to understand that it is wrong to take people's rights away.
I'm also going to put this out there, which is why it's on the exclusive side. But there is currently a governor at the moment, DeSantis. Don't be fooled by him. He is literally taking trans rights away in the state of Florida. I am so incredibly scared that the world is just going to drink the Kool-Aid. He is 10 times worse than your worst enemy. Just remember that I know that we don't talk politics normally, but this, again, like I said, takes away human rights. I give zero fucks about politics side of things, and that's what they do.
I do feel bad for the people in Florida who are afraid to be themselves, but don't worry. We see you, and we are going to try to help in any way we possibly can.
Okay, let's get started on this incredibly scary episode of Marsha P.
By the way, guys, there is a documentary on Netflix about the life and death of Marsha P. Johnson. If you guys want to check it out for further detail, it's there for the taking. It's approximately an hour and 45 minutes long. Definitely a good documentary.
Marsha P. Johnson was an activist and a self-identified drag queen. Known as an outspoken activist for gay rights, Marsha was one of the prominent figures in the Stonewall Uprising in 1969. Though some have mistakenly credited her for starting the riots, she was always forthcoming about having not been present when the riots began.
Marsha was a founding member of the Gay Liberation Front and co-founded the radical activist group Street Transvestite Action Revolution and the Star, alongside close friend Sylvia Riviera. Johnson was also a popular figure in the New York City's gay art scene, modeling for Andy Warhol and performing on stage with the drag performances Troupe Hot Peaches. Johnson was known as the mayor of Christopher Street due to being a welcoming presence in the streets of Greenwich Village.
From 1987 through 1992, Marsha was an AIDS activist with ACT UP. Shortly after Pride, Marsha's body was found floating in the Hudson River in 1992, initially and quickly ruled as a suicide by NYPD. eventually leading to a reopening of the case as a possible homicide.
Well, let's talk about her life before anything took place. Marsha was born on August 24th, 1945. I'm not really interested in giving you guys her dead name, and you're welcome to look that up.
For those of you who do not know what a dead name is the name of the trans person who was born with that name, and they no longer identify or go by it.
Marsha's father, Malcolm, was an assembly line worker for General Motors, and her mother, Alberta, was a housekeeper. Marsha has 5 siblings.
Marsha was very religious. She was raised in Mount Tam in the African Methodist Church. She was a true believer in her faith, and she made comments, and I quote, "I got married to Jesus when I was 16 years old, still in high school."
Marsha, when she was just a little girl at the age of 5 years old, began wearing dresses, but stopped temporarily due to harassment by the boys who lived nearby.
In a 1992 interview, Marsha described being the young victim of rape by a 13-year-old boy. After this, Marsha described the idea of being gay as some sort of dream, rather than something that seemed possible, and chose to remain sexually inactive until leaving for New York at the age of 17.
Marsha's own mother reportedly said that being homosexual is like being lower than a dog. Sadly, there are a lot of parents and grandparents and family members that are out there to this day that still feel this way and look at being in the LGBTQ community as an abomination.
It is absolutely disgusting and despicable for you to look at your baby, the baby you raised, the baby that was inside of your stomach, and see them as an abomination for trying to be who they are on the inside. You, as a society, may identify as your own gender, as I do. I feel like a woman. I always have felt like a woman. But that does not mean everyone feels that way. I could never in my wildest dreams reject my child like that. Do you realize what this kind of criticizing and rejection does to your child's brain? That they want to end their life because, your family is telling them something is so fucked up they can't accept it?
Kids know from a very young age that they do not feel like themselves. It's not a fad. It's not a phase. It's not any of those things. Children know deep down inside what they feel like, who they want to be, and how they want to explore this life. There's no wrong way to feel.
It has nothing to do with their sexuality, and a lot of people confuse this as well. It really has to do with the feelings on the inside.
Her mother didn't really understand anything about the LGBTQ community. As she got older, Marsha's mother also encouraged her child to find a billionaire boyfriend or a husband to take care of her for her life, the goal Marsha often talked about.
Before we go any further, she wants to mention a few different things. First and foremost, she is also a very loud spirit, which I already knew she would be because she was somebody who loved attention on her. She wants to mention that it really did hurt her at the time that her family knew about it. They kind of, made it extremely uncomfortable. Not everyone in the family, but, there were a few people. They didn't really understand the fact that she preferred the female pronouns. Her family didn't try hard to go, by her pronouns, which, by the way, guys, does really affect your children and your adult children and your friends. So if your kid comes out as trans, I know it's going to take an adjustment period and you can slip up. It does happen. They were born a different gender. But if they're going by the pronouns opposite of what they were born, you need to make those attempts. It shouldn't take more than a year. If it takes more than a year, then you have to put some practice into it.
After graduating from Edson High, now known as Thomas A. Edison Career and Technical Academy in Elizabeth in 1963, Johnson left home for New York City with just $15 and a bag of clothes.
She was incredibly excited to take this journey. She shows me she waited and waited and waited and had dreams about this moment for so long because New York was where she felt like she could be accepted. She felt free the moment she got there.
When Marsha got to New York, she headed right to Greenwich Village, which she had originally waited tables. And then soon after, Marsha began hanging out with street hustlers near Howard Johnson on 6th Avenue and 8th Street. Her life changed at that point. She came out and said, "My life has been built around sex and gay, liberation, being a drag queen, and a sex worker."
Absolutely. Now, she did have the sex worker life because there were a lot of men out there that had that kink for people who dressed up in drag or were considered trans, and she took advantage of that money. She knew that it was her calling to stand up for herself and others like her because her religious background. She felt like she could at least make a difference and try to allow people to accept her for who she was. She says she spent many days and many nights being beaten and raped and sodomized, but she said it was all part of the job. She says she can't expect change without a little violence. She said it was part of the job and she didn't let it get to her or bug her. She didn't let it faze her. She says she pretended that everything was fine, and she feels like she had a lavish, incredible life, and she said she wouldn't take it back even for one moment. She says Sylvia, her friend, and her used to cause a lot of ruckus, and she liked it that way.
Marsha initially used the stage name Black Marsha, but later decided on the drag name of Marsha P. Johnson. A lot of people would ask what the P stood for, and she would always answer, it stood for Pay It No Mind, and that's exactly what she did.
She referred to herself as a drag queen or a street queen, and people now identify her as somebody who would be called gender nonconforming. And she never referred to herself as the term transgender, but the term is also not in use when she was alive. People would call her a transvestite. She tells me she agrees with this statement, but she also didn't enjoy the labels that society gave her. So she says that nowadays the term is less offensive. So she said she would definitely be okay with that. She says that she likes the gender fluid pronouns, I guess for her family more so than anything else.
Marsha and Sylvia came up with an organization called Street Transvestite Action Revolution, and the initials were STAR. They helped feed and house the homeless and the poor that were struggling in the village. Marsha would always explain that a transvestite is still a boy, a very manly boy, but a feminine boy.
I believe the hardest thing for her to have to do, even more than fighting and standing for her rights, was the danger of working as a street prostitute in drag, because there are genuinely no laws to protect gay or trans people. People who were involved in sexual acts with her would often physically beat her and rape her and express in very violent ways their own insecurities, or they would try to kill her. She tells me that there was one man who was a closeted gay, but he was also a government official, and he would have sex with her, and then he felt dirty, so he would take his lighter and light a cigar, and he would out the cigar all over her body while he tried to tie her up. She said it was the most excruciating experience, but she said that she went to her happy place even in those moments, because she knew that even though she was being sacrificed, this was all for a greater good.
Which is so terrible.
Right?
To think that people had to go down to this level just to try to be accepted. From there, Marsha and Sylvia had eventually created Star House for trans and gay youth to have a place to stay. It really is remarkable what they were able to accomplish, and I commend them for it.
I want to also point out that she had been shot a couple of times. She had been robbed. She also shows me that she had to continue to be strong. Even though it was mentally taxing, she found a way. She found a way to pray. I know this is something she felt like she had to do, so others did not.
Marsha's style of drag was not serious, high drag, or show drag due to being unable to afford or purchase clothing from expensive stores. Marsha often received leftover flowers after sleeping under tables and used for sorting flowers in the flower district of Manhattan, and was known for wearing crowns of fresh flowers.
She said it made her feel like a queen. It was a very powerful statement, and she absolutely loved being a flower child.
There is some existing footage of Marsha doing full glamorous high drag on stage, but most of Johnson's work performances was with groups that were more grassroots, comedic, and political.
Marsha was the first drag queen to go to Stonewall Inn after they began allowing women and drag queens inside. It was previously a bar for only gay men, and the early morning of the hours of June 28, 1969, the Stonewall Uprising occurred. While the first 2 nights of rioting were the most intense, the clashes with police would result in a series of spontaneous demonstrations and marches through the gay neighborhood of Greenwich Village for roughly a week afterwards.
Marsha has been named along with Zazu Nova and Jackie Harmona by a number of Stonewall veterans interviewed by David Carter in this book. For those of you who do not know what the Stonewall means, they are the riots that sparked the gay revolution, and being 3 individuals known to have been in the vanguard of the pushback against the police and the uprising.
Between 1980 and Johnson's death in 1992, Marsha lived with a friend, Randy Wicker, who had invited Marsha to stay for one night, and it was a very cold one, and Marsha just never left.
When Wicker's love, David, became terminally ill with AIDS, Marsha became his caregiver. After visiting David and other friends with the virus in the hospital during the AIDS pandemic, Johnson, who was also HIV positive, became committed to sitting with the sick and dying, and as well as doing street activism with AIDS activist groups, including ACT UP.
I mean, how more Mother Teresa can you get? Marsha Johnson denied starting the uprising, like we said earlier. She recalled arriving at around 2 that morning, and the riots had already started. By that time, the Stonewall building was on fire, and after police set it on fire, the riots reportedly started around 1:20 in the morning after Stormy Delivery fought back against the police officers who attempted to arrest her that night.
In 1992, gay bashing was epidemic in New York. The anti-LGBT violence was at its peak that year, and they had 13,000 reports of bias crime, and 18% of those were based on violence perpetrated by the police. It was an unrelenting wave of attacks.
In response, marches were organized, and Marsha was one of the activists who marched in the streets demanding justice. Only weeks later, Marsha would be turned up dead under similar circumstances.
Drag queens were taken to jail for no reason as well, and it was a crime to be gay or part of the LGBTQ community.
For the longest time, gay people were not allowed in bars. Then there was a bar called the Stonewall, and I believe the owners were owned by the mafia. That's the rumor anyway.
Marsha's suspicious death occurred during the time when the anti-LGBTQ violence was at its peak, like I said, in New York City, including bias crime by police. Marsha was the only one of the activists who had been drawing attention to this epidemic of violence against the community, participating in the marches and other activists to demand justice for victims and an inquiry into how to stop the violence.
Marsha had been speaking out against the dirty cops and elements of organized crime that many believed were responsible for some of these assaults and murders, and had even voiced concerns of some of what Randy Wicker was stirring up, and making threats about getting herself murdered. This added to the suspicion of foul play and possible murders.
How convenient that police determined it was a suicide. It took them until 2012 to change that to undetermined, and the case has been closed.
Absolute bullshit, and that's what Marsha wants to talk about. She shows me that she had been someone with mental disabilities. She says that she believes it was from the grace of God to be picked with somebody with disabilities, because for her, she doesn't think that with a full capacity brain, she would have been able to handle everything that took place. She can understand why certain people believe she committed suicide. It isn't completely off, but she said she would have done it in a hotel bathroom. She was, sleeping with a gun possibly. She might have taken her gun out, or a regular's gun, and done something along those lines. But she did suggest suicide a lot, and she did put a smile on her face, but in this moment, in this time, she was not suicidal.
Can she take us back to the night and tell us exactly what happened?
This particular day was different from her normal days. She says she knew from the moment she opened her eyes that something wasn't right. Something felt off.
What felt off?
She said she felt like something bad was going to happen. She's seen aura colors. She said that she's seen them around people all the time to tell her good from bad. And today she saw dark clouds of black, and black is never good.
What was she doing before she was found in the water dead?
I see she was doing her own normal routine. Hustling, trying to make money, making her rounds to the churches. She said she was walking alone. I believe she had just seen a few of her regular street friends not too long ago. She was having some chit chat with them, and she even showed me that she was doing a walk, a fierce kind of walk, and her friends were telling her to work it, and she was feeling really good.
Was that late night?
I believe so. It couldn't have been later than 11 p.m., maybe even midnight. It was definitely later in the evening. She had been walking down the street. She shows me she had something covering her shoulders because it was cold. She said she had seen a man in a black car. It was tinted. I'm unsure of the make or model. She says it was a newer vehicle. She usually sized up her clients by their cars. She was going to call it a night because it was kind of slow, maybe even meeting a friend afterwards. But seeing that car kept her trying to get their attention.
Did this person approach her or did she approach them?
From what she shows me, while she was alive, she thought she had approached them. But when she thought about it, she was actually followed by this car. So when she approached the car, she decided to flirt with the driver. She was doing her best moves, and this man, completely bald, I would say 34, 35 in age, she also didn't realize that he was not the only person in the vehicle. She tried to get into the passenger seat, and she did. And that's when she and the guy turned a corner in an alleyway and decided to park there. I believe this was a normal place for her to perform her sexual acts. When she got to that spot, she took off her seatbelt and started rubbing the back of the guy's neck. She said that he looked extremely uncomfortable because he was looking down. He was holding on to the door handle. He also had a really thick mustache. He really gives the 90s cop look.
I love the way you describe people.
I just imagine this look of someone who's a bit overweight, who has this big, thick mustache and bald hair, the typical cop movie look. She wanted everyone to know that this particular area was not a place that she normally hustled, but she figured she'd give it a go since there were other girls around, and she just figured she'd go.
So while she was in the car and stroking the guy's neck, did she see the other guy in the back seat?
At this point, no. She shows me the guy was hiding in the back. He was on the bottom of the car. She shows me that this particular car had a lot of space in the back seat, so a full-grown man could lay down in there with no issues. She also didn't realize this guy was a cop. She just assumed he was someone who was sort of rich, who had a lot of money, that had never really experienced a trans person before, so she was trying to take the edge off.
So a friend of hers had heard that she had gotten in a car with Italian men. Is this the same vehicle? And would she describe these men as Italian?
She says, yes. She said they had that look, but she's also telling me that she understands why people thought that they were Italian. She also is telling me that they might have been pretending to be Italian.
Her friend would warn her not to get into these types of vehicles. Why did she not listen?
From what she shows me, she never set limitations for herself, and she always felt like she could give everyone a chance. She says that she only listened to herself, and she knew how to take care of herself. She says it was a very naive move of her.
Well, let's move on with the rest of your details.
From what I can see and from what she shows me, the police were involved with this festive committee, including Red Mahoney, who is not involved in this. She understands why people think that because there are a lot of shady things going on in the background with the mob, but her specific death, I know there were threats made that other people would end up like her. It was a simple death threat, and she understands why everyone would think that, but she's telling me to tell everybody this is not the case. Back to her being in the vehicle, she shows me that there were a lot of police officers that were consistently arresting trans people and gay people, and it led to nowhere where they would get arrested and held for a couple days, potentially a month or so, and then they would just be released, and then a cop would be really pissed off because he'd have to deal with this person on the street again. This particular cop arrested her a lot, actually, and she had a lot of very outspoken moments with her. He told her one day he was going to take care of her.
Was this the guy who picked her up?
It was not, but he was definitely the guy in the back seat. She shows me that if he was the one who had tried to get her attention, she would have not gotten in the vehicle. She says that he got his cop buddy friend to be the one to make the movement towards her. She shows me that this is the same instance that she started making a move on this guy. He was disgusted and making faces, and she was trying to calm him down. And then the other guy in the back pulled a gun out on her and held it on her. She obviously started screaming, but at this point they had started to drive off so that no one can hear. The two of them took her to a location that was secluded and beat her senseless. I'm thinking it's like a pier or something. She even shows me they used the tool that she could only describe as a barbed wire rod and sodomized her and constantly kept telling her she was a dude and she needs to get it in her fucking head. And she kept screaming, never, never, never. They did this on the hood of their car. And there were people that were walking by and ignored it. And this was not the area where, it was gay friendly in any capacity. I think this is the place that honestly cops would go and take their people before they would haul them off to jail and harm them with no distractions.
Man, I feel so bad for Marsha.
She was bleeding out in every orifice she possibly could. Her eyes hurt. She was bleeding there too. Her legs, her nose, her mouth, a lot of her teeth were missing. Everything was bleeding and everything was slowly disappearing around her. She told the cops to tell her family that she loved them and she was sorry and that she was not who they wanted her to be. She said she doesn't know if they heard them or not, but she was saying this out loud. These two gentlemen wanted to watch her die. They waited for it and then took her to the water. I feel like these two guys were part of her being found as well. I believe they were off duty at the time that they beat her, and I believe they began their shift just before she was found and were probably the first ones on scene. She shows me that everything happened so quickly that they were not able to determine anything. Even the autopsy report was all botched. Everything was done so they could not identify what happened. She shows me she was okay with her death because it was part of the iconic movement and a lot of people were able to see things after she died. She shows me that she had a beautiful life and she was happy and she had been loved by so many and so many people knew her, and even Andy Warhol. She said the two of them had a special relationship as well and she felt privileged to have lived the length that she did. She knew that she was going to die at some point with her HIV, so she wasn't too unhappy with her death. It did take her a while to cross over, at least 2 or 3 years, because she wanted to make sure everyone else was okay. Everyone was grieving for her, and she wanted to be there as a support for them. She says she messed around with a lot of lights everywhere, especially the gay lights. She said she always drops flowers for people, and all the people know that those flowers come from her.
She's definitely truly an icon, and she did die for us. A lot of people are scared to do that now. She was the one who put her neck out on the line for all of us, and I will forever be grateful to her. She paved the way that was extremely scary back then, and she did it in such a brave way.
Absolutely, and she said she wishes that she was able to solve her case, but there's not enough evidence and washed away, and she was cremated. And that's what these police officers hope for. She shows me that they did go down for dirty related issues in the future and after she passed on, but nothing too significant. Just a bunch of lazy bastards. She also wanted everyone to know she's so grateful for you all listening today, and it doesn't even matter what's going on in the world. She says that you've got to fight for everyone's right. It doesn't matter if you agree or not. She says it's okay not to understand and it's okay not to agree, but it's not okay to hate other people for not agreeing with you. She says she has an unlimited supply of flowers in her home and they never wilt, and she is happy and at peace, and she sings all the time. Apparently she used to do it horribly, but now she loves her voice. She is happy and at peace, and she gets to have the body and the hair that she always wanted. She says she had the most masculine jawline when she was alive, and it's now vanished, and she's very happy with the way she looks.
She definitely deserves to feel happy with the way she looks and how she wants to present herself. I know we can sit here and talk all day about this particular episode and all the crazy things that have happened in the trans part of the LGBTQ community, but we do have quite a few other episodes that we will be able to discuss all of this in further detail. Next week, we will be covering the episode of Aubrey Dameron, and that will be available June 9th, and it will be on the regular side. Until next time, guys, stay freaked out.